If you scroll through TikTok or Instagram, you'll find everyone or a lot of people diagnosing themselves. I'm anxious, I'm traumatized, I've got this dysfunction, I'm triggered. Sound familiar? But are we becoming more aware or more afraid of our own emotions? Um, you just need to hashtag the word trauma and you'll see billions of views. And I want to get to a place today to really understand, is this trauma in the form of PTSD? Are the terms being used too casually? Are they losing their clinical precision? I want to explore how this trend can undermine your resilience and how to reclaim a more grounded, compassionate, and self regulated relationship with our emotions. When I use the word resilience, it doesn't mean to be super steely tough. It does mean how can I adapt and bounce back from a difficult situation or experience that I'm having? So I want to get to how over identifying with a label actually can have a negative effect on you. It reduces your ability to make decisions or to have agency. You start becoming the diagnosis. And I'm going to suggest many of you have never been diagnosed anyway. And why should you? You know, the DSM-5 has, I don't know, these days 500 plus dysfunctions. When we talk about syndromes, that's another way for the medical establishment to say, we don't know what it is, so we'll call it a syndrome. I don't know if this is helping us. I don't know if all these labels are helping us. Maybe we need to strip it down and make it simpler for ourselves. It can also lead to avoidance. I can't handle this because I'm X, because I'm traumatized. Instead of saying, well, what's a different way to experience this? It can also lead to increased symptom vigilance. Is this anxiety or trauma? And it becomes a bit of a vicious loop. So I want to look at this and move away in this short presentation from learned helplessness to maybe learned happiness, learned optimism, learned agency. So yes, diagnostic language can help, but it can be limiting. And I think we need to be aware of the difference in the two. So let's talk about the psychology of labeling as well. They activate cognitive schemas, or another way of describing it is our core beliefs. They shape our beliefs about ourselves. The more we believe something, the more, in many respects, it becomes true. If someone continues to say, I'm broken, or I can't do this, or I'm never any good at this, or I'm a failure, or relationships just aren't for me, I can't cope, it becomes, in many respects, a self-fulfilling prophecy from a neuroscience perspective, because our way of talking to ourselves over and over and over again shape the way our neurons fire and shape our plasticity. So our beliefs inform our thoughts, inform our emotions, inform our behaviors. Therefore, over-labeling can narrow our belief system. And so we have to look at our belief system. We have to look at how this is reducing our flexibility or window of tolerance. So for example, if a student says, I'm traumatized by exams, if we unpack this, what does it really mean? It means I feel overwhelmed. I feel unsafe. That's a feeling. And what we're trying to do is separate the feeling from a lifelong identity. So we have to have reflective language that shifts and challenges that. Okay. I feel anxious. Well, possibly. Or I'm depressed. But could it be that I'm feeling anxiety right now? Could it be I'm feeling depressed, I'm feeling low. But that doesn't mean that's who you are. I'm triggered. I hear that one a lot. But could it be my body feels activated and I need to be able to ground myself? So the next part is really thinking about, well, how can we use our body? How can we use our nervous system to support us during these difficult times? Um, Siegel talks about the window of tolerance, or a more modern way of describing it, he also describes, is our psychological resilience. So when we're hyper aroused, we our nervous system reacts in such a way that it's a fight or flight response. You're all familiar with that. When we're hypo aroused, we go to freeze or collapse, and that means we're unable to respond. But a resilient state says, I can be regulated. I can experience hardship or difficulty, but I can remain curious. I can remain connected, and I can adapt. So those triggered moments are actually opportunities, and they can be reframed as ways to expand our tolerance. We are not in fixed states. We can adapt. We can change. You are not the same person you were 5 years ago, 10 years ago, or 15 years ago. There's different ways to do this. There's tons of different grounding techniques and available. A very simple one, which I like, is to be able, and it's also comes from an old yoga tradition, which is to breathe in for a certain number, say 5, and breathe out slowly, doubling it. So you could breathe in for 5 and breathe out for 10. And repeat that. And what you'll find is you will be able to downregulate your nervous system so that you feel more safe, and also more resilient. But there's more ways to do this, and I've I've been working on a system. It was originally called AEIOU, but it might be EIOUA. It's not as nifty as AEIOU because it's the vowels. But before we get there, I want to do something which people find challenging. They don't particularly like. It's not particularly popular. I often hear patients or clients say, yeah, I did this because she did that or he did that. And I'll say, tell me more. And it might be as simple as, and it's not simple, it's complex, forgive me. It might be as complex as, okay, because that person didn't meet my needs, that meant I went off and slept with all these other people, even though I'm in a married relationship. And in a way, what they're saying is, well, that person, if they had been a better person, then I would have not been unfaithful. I know this is challenging, but the language I hear is, well, they triggered me, or I felt unsafe. I'll give you another example. I get really angry with other cyclists, so it gives me the right to shout at them and bark at them and shove them around. They don't say the shove them around bit, but anyway, I know they do. And yes, there's a nervous system response to a physical threat, but really there's a psychological threat going on as well, which is I need the space on the road. Those other cyclists shouldn't be there. Um, that's not okay. Where am I going with this? Often, counter to popular belief, it's not about our threat. Okay, a lot of psychologists talk about, well, we're threatened and we feel unsafe. And then if you go a bit deeper, people say, well, that's because my needs weren't met. If my needs were met, then I wouldn't behave this way. But I'm going to dig a bit deeper on this one and ask you, well, is that really true? Is it because your needs weren't met or you didn't get what you wanted? Oh, I know that's not uncomfortable, right? Sometimes I hear people say, well, that person makes me feel unsafe. And I say, physically, do they make you feel unsafe? No. And psychologically, yes. Okay. What have they done? Well, they said something that I didn't like. Oh, okay. Was that something they said untrue? No, it was true, but they shouldn't have said it. And now I feel threatened. And I ask the question, and I know it's uncomfortable. Is it possible that you might not be getting what you want? See, a lot of our suffering psychologically is not getting what we want or getting what we don't want. Okay. And so when we don't get what we want, we're not actually traumatized. We're just upset. No, I'm traumatized. No, you might not be traumatized. You're just upset because you didn't get what you want. And if you start examining over and over different aspects of your life, or what the CBT people like to call negative automatic thoughts, the threat underneath that, the fear underneath that was I didn't get what I wanted. And the way we can look at that is the person is suffering because they're attached for things to go a certain way. When they don't go that way, that's when they get upset. How do we work with that? So I'm going to talk you through a model I've been developing. As I said, it's the AEIOU model, and hopefully it'll be helpful for you, okay? The A stands for awareness. Can I be aware of what's happening? Sometimes something happens, and in the heat of the moment, our amygdala shoots off, and before you know it, we're fighting and flighting and freeing and freezing and fawning and all sorts of stuff, right? But if we can be aware, we can slow it down. We can use that big chunky part of our brain at the front called our prefrontal cortex. Can I acknowledge I'm experiencing this? What is it like? What am I thinking? What am I feeling? What's going on in my body? What are my reactions? The next part is the E, and that stands for the embodied experience. What can I do using my body to downregulate that? I might use breath work. I might use movement. I might use music. I might use walking mindfully barefoot on the grass. Obviously not if you're driving the car. Well, how can I use my body to support me? The I stands for identification. Where have I over-identified and where have I under-identified? You know, someone says something to us, it upsets our feelings. Where have we over-identified? They shouldn't talk to me like that. They should be more respectful. If they were more respectful, they wouldn't do that. Don't they realize who I am? Don't they realize that I'm very senior and need to be respected and I've got a white beard? Come on. Or is it, maybe I've over-identified. Maybe they're actually my best friend and they're telling me a truth that I needed to hear. And maybe I didn't get what I wanted. How can I change my relationship to over-identifying and under-identifying? I could do a whole hour on that, but I'm going to save you time, so I'm not going to go through that today. Then we go to the O. What are my options? See, a lot of people are familiar with Kubler-Ross and the great work she did around loss and the stages of grief. And, you know, rightly so. She said they're not always sequential, but when we lose something that's important to us, and it might be something that we even haven't got, a broken dream, there is shock, there's disbelief, there's anger, there's frustration, there's pleading, there's bargaining, there's deep, deep sadness. And hopefully we get to that place called acceptance. The bit that Kubler-Ross, and she was brilliant, missed was the decision towards acceptance. Because if you decide to accept, that changes everything. If you decide not to accept, you continue in the loop. You carry on in that vicious circle that you've been in. So you have to think about, what are my options? What can I do about it? What choice do I have? What agency do I have? And then we go back to you, which is understanding. Can I see this differently now? Can I see it with a different perspective? Can I step away from this? So hopefully these are tools that you can use to support yourself, whether you're upset or experiencing some form of trauma, which comes from the word, I think, traumel, a wound. We do heal from wounds. We can heal from wounds. But we can do it in a kind and compassionate way without over-dramatizing it and making it something that, let's say, starts taking over our life. And we can, in the words of Oliver James, not Jamie Oliver, we can go to a place of saying maybe life is to be enjoyed, not endured. Hope that helps. I'll see you next time.